Nope, I'm just gonna go live. Ladies and gentlemen, what is going on? Happy Monday, May 24th, 2021. At On Point discussion here on this special Monday night episode. Guys, it's weird to be back on Mondays. I know when we first started off, that was usually our go-to day. But after a while, here we are again. Tonight, we have the distinct honor of welcoming Kevin Cordosa. He is the co-founder of the Crude Intelligence Group. And Kevin, I will go ahead and let you introduce yourself to the audience, and then we can go ahead and start our discussion here and see where this podcast episode takes us. Welcome to the show, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be part of a podcast, my first podcast, actually. And thank you for the introduction. My name is Kevin Cardosa. I'm the co-founder and principal of Crude Intelligence Group, which is a corporate intelligence or research-based firm.
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I didn't know if you were done talking yet, or if you were gonna keep going with more.
I mean, I'm more than happy to share more about Crude Intelligence if you like me to.
I mean, hey, we're here to educate people here on the podcast. So if you've got more you want to share, I mean, go for it. That's all you. This is all your time.
Absolutely. So Crude Intelligence Group, it came after the thought of how can we assist companies in staying compliant with regulations. So we've tried to capture the full definition of intelligence by collecting research, open source research on different topics that are of interest to clients. Our four fundamental areas of focus are government affairs or politics, corporate intelligence, intel gathering, and capital expansion. So within corporate intelligence and intel gathering, what we have is a very powerful research methodology that allows us to get information that may not necessarily be accessible through a simple Google search. So we use a lot of that research to help clients move some of the policy issues that are of interest to them. And also we use some of that corporate research to do an analysis as to how their company is standing within the public. We can use that same research to evaluate what the competition is doing, how their marketing campaigns, how effective they are, and see how their products are measuring with the public sentiment. But primarily our biggest suit is the government affairs portion, because we help companies navigate the bureaucratic processes involved with potential expansion. As you know, expansion, it involves a whole sorts of things, all the way from taking a look at what the market looks like in a specific area. What are some of the regulations that folks need to meet, and also what are some of the permits or requirements to fulfill that particular expansion in an area. So that's where we come in. We collect all of that information for the client. We hand over that information to them, and we are with them every step of the way until their project comes to life. Now, from the government affairs side, we help clients become their own lobbyists. We're not lobbyists, we're consultants. We track, obviously, legislative changes, opportunities to provide testimony amongst different committees, and we write all the information that they need in order to be effective self-advocates for their organizations and companies. So I try to summarize it as much as I could, but that's what we do in a nutshell.
That's very in depth, needless to say. So I guess I'm wondering then, and then after, I just want to ask this question, and then I'll open it up to the my three co-hosts. But how did you get into this field, this very complex and complicated field of intelligence?
Well, I guess I can go back to my childhood in the sense that I have always been involved in the political world. Where I come from in El Salvador in Central America. As a kid, you are taught about the 1980 Civil War. You are taught about the different political movements that have taken place in the country, et cetera, et cetera. And by default, you become aware of all the political changes that are taking place in the country. So that led me um, to do an internship in high school at the New Mexico State Legislature. At the time, I wasn't really sure what I mean. I had some inclinations towards politics and the government affairs world, but I wasn't really sure. But that internship in my senior year of high school, that's what sealed the deal for me. From there, I went to NMSU, got my degree in government or political science, a couple of minors in political theory, international relations, and then fortunately enough, the work that I've done has fall under that lines of studies. I know that many folks they go to school to study a particular thing, but their jobs are not necessarily within the area that they study. I've been blessed. The everything that I've done so far, it's been within the realm of my university studies. So fast forward, after putting in a few years and working with local government, I became the director of government and military affairs for the El Paso Chamber of Commerce. That it was sort of like baptism by fire, because part of my job was to advocate on behalf of our regional military complex, which at the time I had I didn't even know how to get it to Fort Bliss or White Sands Missile Range. So it was a very steep learning curve, and that led to being involved with other private companies that are doing projects on situational awareness with the Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security. So, and from that point forward, given I wasn't necessarily fulfilled working for an entity or having a boss per se. I got together with a friend of mine and we formed Crude Intelligence, and we basically put together everything that we like to do. All the way from research to dealing with legislature, interacting with elected officials, etc. And we figure, hey, let's put this together and get paid to have some fun. So that's how it led to this. Now, as far as the intelligence part, that's where it gets interesting, because a lot of all throughout my career, a lot of the part of my job was to do research. Always try to stay ahead of changes. Always try to be a few steps ahead of the competition. Always being up to date with what's going on at the national level, state level, local level, and truly see what the competitors are doing and saying, and what folks, how the public feels about them, and what are the areas that we're lacking. So early on, I discovered that information research or intelligence is just such a critical component, or let me rephrase that, such an unknown critical component of any day-to-day business operations. Because even if you open a food truck, you still have to do a little bit of research. Okay, so if I'm gonna open a Mexican food truck, well, I need to see how many other Mexican food trucks are in the area where I'm gonna operate. What days are they parked there, et cetera, et cetera. That is intelligence. You need to see, okay, what are the other folks offering their menu? What can I do differently that I can attract folks to come buy from me? All of that is intelligence. So we deal with intelligence on a day-to-day basis, and many times we don't acknowledge that, or we don't notice it. The only benefit that we provide as Screwed is that we take a really big deep dive into intelligence collection, or open source intelligence collection, meaning we're not hacking stuff, we're not getting into people's email, we don't do any of that, but we collect information that is publicly available all around the world. We don't have any language limitations. We have capabilities of analyzing over 200 languages within our firm, and we have capabilities of taking a deep dive into the dark web, because believe it or not, there are messaging boards in the dark web. People are talking about companies, products, other individuals, and we're able to collect that information as well. So that's I guess the long answer to a short question. That's what led me to where I'm at right now.
Kevin, did you find it hard, like given the election year last year and all the uncertainty and all the unknown? I know you said you like to stay ahead, but like you knew if Trump stayed in office, legislation wasn't going to change much, but with Biden, there was a lot of uncertainty and unknown. Is he going to do executive orders, change a lot of legislation? So was that hard trying to stay ahead of that with the election that we just had?
There was a lot of noise in the system. That's the first thing right out of the bat, because there were a lot of claims, both sides of the aisle, certain nefarious things took place on the left or on the right. So that created a lot of confusion as far as what election goes and for the general public. So now, as far as the legislative changes, I mean, we knew if Trump was going to win, we knew what was coming next. We knew that the Congress was going to remain a certain way, even if Trump won. So there was going to be a type of a battle, if you will, in as far as what's going to get passed and what isn't going to get passed. But we knew what that landscape looked like. As far as the Biden administration, there was a lot of uncertainty, because there was a congressional faction that was proposing a very aggressive legislative agenda, but what the administration campaigned on was in a more conservative, slow-paced type of agenda, not too drastic at first, but we'll make the changes as we go along, but not everything right off the bat. So that was things that we needed to take under evaluation, not just the congressional side, but also the different organizations that were pushing for particular legislative agenda items, right? Because at the end of the day, those organizations get to lobby and sometimes dictate what policy may look like. So there were a lot of pieces moving that we had to take under consideration. And again, there was a lot of back and forth as far as, I'll give you the perfect example. There was conversations that there was an opposition on what was increasing the Supreme Court, the number of justices, then past election, then a commission was established to explore and do a study on the Supreme Court to include the current size. So there was a lot of things that in this particular case, we had to take the public opinion heavily under consideration, because oftentimes we found more accurate information based on the public opinion than what was being offered through official channels. So that was the interesting and fun exercise, because again, it's part of putting all the pieces together and figuring out how we're going to stay ahead, how we're going to help clients stay ahead and in the upcoming changes, and who's driving the bus. where is there a focal place where we can look into as to where are the policy changes coming from. So that's part of all the evaluation that we took under consideration, and we still continue to do that. It's been a very fun last 4 months, to say the least.
So, I know you mentioned the 1980s, El Salvador, the Civil War, and I don't know if Wyatt told you, but my degree is in Latin American political history.
Really?
So I am all about the conflicts in the 20th century, and obviously Cold War era. The various Marxist attempts in Latin America and the Southern Triangle, I think, as it's called. But I do want to ask you, about that. But I do want to also ask if Julius or Rhino have any questions they want to ask, any comments that they want to contribute to this, because I think this conversation is just so fascinating, because you're able to learn the various the different angles, right, the different perspectives on a lot of this, all of these like issues that we hear on a daily basis, but then looking at it from the other side of the individuals who are actually working these cases or working on a lot of the stuff that you're doing. So Julius or Rhino, if you guys have anything you'd like to add before I go on my history tangent.
Real quick, Kevin.
Yeah.
So would you consider your company to be a private defense contractor? Do you work directly with the government to gain contracts to do research?
No, we actually don't pursue any government contracts. We are primarily a private firm. We work with private sector clients. Thus far, we're open to helping other municipalities or government agencies in whatever they may need, but at the moment we're strictly private sector driven. Yeah.
Right now,
I don't have any follow-ups. I'm actually interested in the next topic we're going towards. So.
Is that the next topic on the outline, or my off?
No, you're off topic. The direction here, but yeah, I'm interested in hearing about that. So
yes, my history tangent. All right, so were you in El Salvador in the 1980s when a lot of the Civil War was happening, or were you watching it as a Salvadorian, outside of the borders of the confines of the country?
Interestingly enough, the war ended in 1992. That's when the peace accords were signed. I was born in 91. So no, I fortunately I did not live through it, but growing up, there was still a lot of aftermath effects that you still were able to see, and you were still I still had to live through. For example, one of the big changes was that the guerrilla movement, the FMLN, which I don't know if you speak Spanish, but which stands for Farabundo Martí para Liberación Nacional, which is the guerrilla movement. They became a political party. That was going to continue fighting for the ideals that they fought for during the armed conflict, but through a legislative standpoint. So and seeing that a lot of those folks became from fighting in the mountains, became political figures, members of the National Assembly, and becoming wealthier than the general public. That was, I think, that over time that became a very hard pill to swallow for the people that they so-called fought for. Even until this point, there there's a former president that came to power under the FMLN. His name is Mauricio Funes, who again was there to fight on behalf of the people, right? And still fighting for the guerrilla ideals that they were fighting for in the 80s. Well, he's under political asylum in Nicaragua because he stole over $350 million from the state. So, when you see things like that, it's kind of, when are we gonna get out of this funk, if you will? Like we understand the two sides within the political spectrum, but there is some moderation as to how far each side goes and the type of things that they do. So because of things like that, it's you get to live through that, and it's still until this day you still feel some of those post-war effects that the country's still trying to move on from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for those who don't know, this particular conflict began, I believe, in 1979.
Correct.
And I believe, I'm recalling my history, I believe it was about 100,000 people who were killed or quote unquote disappeared.
Right.
And this is a very common thing in Latin America, is that the word disappeared becomes an action. Like the government basically kidnaps you and then you're gone. I mean, you're disappeared. You talk to people on the street in the late 20th century, you ask them, oh, what happened to so and so? Oh, he's disappeared. The government basically got rid of any insurgents, right, that they thought were coming after the pro-capitalist, anti-Marxist government in a lot of these countries. And so what you started to see was, right, that the Carter administration and the Reagan administration, they were supplying these pro-U.S. anti-Marxist governments out in Latin America. I mean, in El Salvador, it was up to about $2 million a day that they were giving, these governments down there, all because they aligned with the pro-capitalist ideology of the United States, and they wanted to keep any form of Cuba 2.0 from happening anywhere else in Latin America. The amount of human rights violations that took place not only in El Salvador but everywhere, Nicaragua, Panama, all South America, even Chile, Brazil, Argentina, even. I mean, it's ridiculous, and it's really unfortunate that this was such a common theme in this part of the country because, like you said, Kevin, these countries are still reeling from these guerrilla style wars that happened, and as much as it pains me to say it, right, the United States is partially at fault for a lot of that. And some of these Latin American countries just still to this day, they cannot forgive the United States for what they were, what this country was funding down there. I mean, it's just crazy. And it's
a very interesting and complex situations, because after the peace accords were signing in 92, when you still had the government leaning faction, the right and power, and the left, the guerrilla faction became a political entity or a political faction. They came together and passed an amnesty piece of legislation that they forgave each other, that neither of the sides could be persecuted for their war crimes, even if they had killed folks with their own hands. They couldn't touch him, both sides. So what does that say about the conflict? And I mean, there could be two arguments, right? That like they've moved on so much that they were able to put that together. But at the same time, there's that sentiment within the people that, like, wait a second, a few years back, if you saw each other in the street, you would have killed each other, and now you're you're pals, you're forgiving each other. So at the end of the day, the folks that ended up affected by this was the people, and not the political elites or leadership.
Yes, and on that topic of I believe, if I recall correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they had signed they had signed the original like the peace treaty, but then I think that peace treaty got ruled like unruly or unconstitutional because then
2016.
One of the courts said no, like you can still prosecute some of these individuals who are guilty of these crimes, these war crimes. So it's a very messy situation. And again, El Salvador was not the only country that went through this. We can list all the countries in Latin America that came down and fell to a lot of these pro-United States led guerrilla warfare style battles and all the deaths and atrocities that were committed. Again, it hurts me to say that because obviously I love my country, I love the United States, but I can't turn a blind eye to a lot of these things that were happening down there.
Yeah, it's a sad situation, but it's as being from El Salvador, it's part of our history, and that's what makes, whether it was pretty or ugly, still part of our history, and we can't erase that. And what the new generations, we learn from it. We see what it was like before, during, and after, and what we have left to do is learn from it and try not to make those same mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I want to Rhino or Julius, if you have anything you want to add to this, because if you guys do after that, I do want to ask you a question about maybe. Well, let's see, Rhino or Julius, do you guys have anything you want to add to this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the key players during the Civil War, during the late 80s into the early 90s, it really appears that it was more of an excuse for a lot of these bigger powers to get involved simply for the purposes of the Cold War. I don't think United States involvement in El Salvador in the 80s was because they genuinely cared about making things better in El Salvador. I mean, if you look at who aided the side of the FMLN, you have China, Soviet Union, Cuba, the Czech Republic or Czechoslovakia back in the day, North Korea. And on the other side, you had, the United States, you had Brazil, Colombia, Israel, Taiwan. You had the same people who were fighting each other during the Cold War who were involved on either side in the Civil War down in El Salvador. So I think it was strictly political to have these other countries' involvement in this war.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it absolutely was. Especially, again, Cuba. I mean, Cuba was the real threat in the Western Hemisphere for communism, and the United States. Henry Kissinger got in there, the Secretary of State back then, and he, if I recall, I think there was something to the extent of he was like, "It's not, I'd be damned if it's going to happen anywhere but besides that one country of Cuba." But
Yeah.
Julius, did you have anything you wanted to add to this historical chat?
Central America and South America, a lot of the stuff that went on there politically in the Cold War era, I'm actually not too familiar with, and I'm so happy we're having this conversation because I am going to go into deep research after this show. And I've looked into everything, but I think at the end of the day, I mean, you just, like you said, Kevin, you got to use it to grow. This new generation of El Salvadorians or Central, you guys got to use that to grow and not waver back. We can get into the Marxism talk for days, but I won't.
Well, we can. I think the five of us, or at least the four of us, Kevin. I don't know what your views are, but I think the four of us on here could probably have a very good anti-Marxist dialogue for hours on end. I did want the question I wanted to ask you, Kevin, and this is there is no right or wrong answer to this, of course. It's just kind of your opinion, your perspective. So obviously, right, 20th century, the United States was out, combating battles in a lot of regions of the world, trying to battle what was then, the communist threat, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
we move on to we can probably say the 21st century, just to put a milestone somewhere. Do you think that the United States is fighting is it a battle with itself against another threat, and that threat being what a lot of people would argue maybe are various social issues that we have in this country right now, i.e., racism, the Black Lives Matter movement, all this and that? Is that obviously not to the same extent, but is there a similar sentiment, right, to fight off those bad things that are plaguing this country right now from a government level?
Mhm. Well, I think that there is certainly a fight against evil, if you will, taking place, and I think that that's something that has happened throughout history in the United States. Every decade there's a social movement against wrongdoings of different kinds, right? Like this day and age, we have groups that are fighting against racism. We have other groups that are fighting for what some consider our fundamental freedoms, such as our Second Amendment. And there's that constant fight. Now the difference is on which side of the aisle you sit on. That's what it's gonna, I think, that would make the difference, because things have, in my personal opinion, have become so polarized that there's no middle ground almost. It's either you sit on a certain side of the political spectrum, so you're fighting this fundamental freedoms to protect some fundamental liberties and right, correct. So it's just, it depends where you're sitting, but is that happening in this day and age? Well, I think that for the vast majority of the United States history, there's been an internal fight against some internal evils, if you will.
It's so fascinating, because one of the things that the United States got called out on in the really beginning in the 1960s,
Mm-hmm.
right, was that we were out, beyond our borders overseas, fighting this dangerous, evil threat of communism in
Mm-hmm.
places like Vietnam and Korea. But we had our own issues that we couldn't even figure out, right?
Right.
African Americans getting hosed down in Birmingham, Alabama. People literally getting lynched. I mean, across the country with in the civil rights era. I mean, so it's a very dynamic thing to think about, because we're out there trying to save the world, but we can't even save ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really, I mean, if you really want to look at it in that way. I don't mean to get so dark and depressing here, because like I've already alluded to, I do love this country, but it would be very ignorant of me to say that it doesn't have its flaws, and that it's very, there's always room for improvement. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, at least in my opinion. But
in
any case,
that's true. But the coming from a different country, the thing that amazes me the most is that whatever it is that we're fighting against, we have the ability and the freedom to do so freely, without facing any Well, I mean, there have been cases where there was some persecution, right? But if you look at countries like like China, let's say, like we saw what happened in Hong Kong and the protests, and they were severely suppressed by the Chinese government. Yes, we have a lot of imperfections as a nation, but we still have that ability to express those and find a way to work them out and come to a solution.
Absolutely. No, I absolutely agree. I really do. Gentlemen, anything else on this before we move on to our next topic of the night? All right. Normally, at about this time, 35 minutes past, we would do sports. However, today, because we do have a guest, we're going to stay on the international relations front here on the show. Let's move on to another hot topic issue. We're going to obviously we'll leave the Cold War conversation behind. We're going to do a little 2021 talk here. Let's talk President Biden. Let's talk infrastructure here in the United States. So obviously, of course, Democrats and Republicans right now in the Senate have a very different idea, very different framework, right, in their plan on how they want to address the infrastructure, the crumbling infrastructure that we have in the country. What are the fundamental differences on each side? What exactly is each side asking for, and why is there such a gridlock in Washington over this? And this is an open question. This can go at any of the four of you to get the conversation started. I just want to hear your perspective. Whoever wants to go first, take a stab at it. Go for it. I'm all here for it.
Based on what we're looking at is that the biggest issue has been the redefinition of the term infrastructure, right? So the biggest battle that we're looking at, and I guess you could consider an ideological battle in infrastructure is that we have one side that it's referring to infrastructure as we normally traditionally known it as, roads, highway, bridges, things that have kept America moving. And we have the other side that has taken a broader approach as to the definition of infrastructure, because and I think that part of that is that after taking a look into the proposed bill of that the administration has put forward, we find things such as $5 billion to combat gun violence, or as the other side calls it, gun control, which basically it would be designed to establish this community-based prevention programs or groups to fight the quote-unquote epidemic on gun violence, right? So if you look at it objectively, is that hard infrastructure? Well, that depends upon the which lens you're using to look at it, right? We find portions of like the what they call the green slush funds, which is a big subsidies for electric vehicles. Is that part of infrastructure? Well, could be, could not be. And then we have Medicaid benefit expansion under that infrastructure bill. But when you look at the other side's definition of infrastructure, we see that only approximately 40% of the original proposed $2.4 trillion, only 4% of that was dedicated to what it's known as traditional infrastructure, which includes highways, roads, bridges, etc. So it's a very it depends where you're sitting, right? We saw that there's a new piece of legislation that the White House put out, which reduced the price tag to $1.7 trillion. But then the question comes up, like how will that be? How is that going to pay for? Well, based on the premises of the bill, they have approximately 8 years to spend that money. But the way it is believed that the money would be raised, it would take approximately 15 years for the federal government to regain those funds that they spent by increasing corporate taxes. So there's that battle that for the next 15 years we'll see consecutive increases in corporate taxes to pay a bill that gets passed in 2021. And what are the long-term ramifications of it? There's a very fluid conversation that goes back and forth. Now, interestingly enough, the Republican side of the House, it's not opposed to a traditional type of infrastructure bill, because I don't know if you guys remember that the Trump administration put together an infrastructure proposal as well. That didn't get anywhere, but they put it together. So there is a collective middle ground, that there's a need for something relative to infrastructure. I think that right now it's a lot of the conversation is on what does that mean? What does infrastructure mean?
Mm-hmm.
At least that's what we're looking at from our side.
It's almost like the so-called COVID relief packages that were passed a few months ago with, let's slide in some money for the art museums in New York and some of these other non-essential COVID related things, right? They like to jam pack these bills with all of these different additions, and people they're like, okay, no one's going to notice. But obviously the party on the opposite side of the aisle that's going to be looking at that bill is going to be like, well, what the hell? That's usually all that comes down to. But no, I totally agree with you on that, though. I mean, it's what percentage of the bill is actually infrastructure? If you really sit down, you really read the bill, what's in there, what exactly is going to our roads, our bridges, the infrastructure that millions of Americans use every single day. So, gentlemen, any other comments or thoughts on this?
It's the same song and dance every time a bill like this is proposed to Congress. I mean, it's the whitewashing of definitions of what we think is infrastructure, what isn't, what should be in the bill, what is going to be in the bill, and then we have the discussion of where's the money going to come from. Is the money going to come from corporate tax increases? Is the money going to come from repurposing unused money? It's the same deal every single time. So there's really not much to add on it.
Right. Really quickly, Wyatt or Julius, before you guys say anything, for those who are on the live stream, the Milwaukee Bucks right now are up 46-20, I believe. I was looking, someone was asking me, and I just got a message on Twitter asking me about that. So that is the score on the Bucks game, NBA playoffs. Wyatt and Julius, any comments or thoughts on this?
Just it's disconcerting when you have Democrats saying, "Oh, we're just going to push this bill without Republican support," and as Kevin mentioned, they have some bills there for the gun restriction. I mean, talking about infrastructure for that. Republicans talking about, well, the state should decide, with money allocated, how to fix their roads or how they're going to do that. I know Arizona, I think you got to pay a pretty hefty pay of admissions or something like that for their roads. But if you ever go to Arizona, you see their roads are pristine and the construction is done quickly because you pay so much. People who live in Arizona pay so much. And so they get those roads fixed quickly and they're perfect. I think every state should see what Arizona does and do the exact same thing. But again, people still complain about having to pay so much there. But you go there, their roads are perfect. You don't have construction for years and years and years. They get it done quickly. But yeah, like Rhino said and Kevin mentioned, it's the same song and dance. And I don't like how Democrats are, well, we're just going to push this bill anyway without Republican support?
Well, there's a small problem with that, though. There are a lot of Democrat moderates that could be imposing of this bill going forward. So that may not be the case when they try and push this through. They may not get the Democratic support they need.
I also go ahead.
Make no mistake that both sides of the aisle have this tendency of adding interesting items into pieces of legislation that may not necessarily have a whole lot of in common. Like in other pieces of legislation, we see when there's been a Republican control. When the legislative branch is under Republican control, we see pieces of legislation that are unrelated to healthcare issues, and we see a little line there in there, defund Planned Parenthood, so or allow more flexibilities as far as ownership and firearms or whatever things that it seems like as if it's a common practice on at the legislative level. It just depends on who's in power at the point in time.
I did want to add something real quick to Wyatt's point about the roads in Arizona. I just want to also caution Wyatt that in Arizona it does not snow for a whole bunch of months out of the year, and they don't have to deal with the salt and the cold weather. And then
Juan, have you ever worked outside when it was 125 degrees?
I am aware that the pavement does, the heat does impact the pavement. I'm aware, but I'm just saying the snow, also takes a toll on a lot of our infrastructure up here. I mean, that goes without saying.
Also, if I may, very quickly, Arizona as a state gets quite a bit of snow. It's not just the desert that has highways. You go up north in Arizona, they get feet of snow.
But what percentage of Arizona though is covered in snow? I mean,
probably about a third in the wintertime.
Okay, well that leaves 66% that is still not covered in snow. So,
well, that 66% is also they're experiencing 140-degree surface temperature.
I think the point still stands that 2/3 of the state is not covered in snow. I'm not gonna do this. I'm not gonna get into a topography or.
Well, if we're talking about severe weather, I mean, they have just as severe weather as we do.
Julius, what were you gonna say?
Arizona
what is going on right now?
What? What's up?
Y'all get into topography battle right now, man. It's hilarious. We're talking about Biden infrastructure.
You know what? I'm gonna save all of my weather talk for tomorrow night show. No, I'm not gonna ruin the surprise. Let's just really quickly let's get into the Middle East, because I know that's been a very big issue here with what's been happening over in I believe it's in Gaza and in Israel and all that over there. So yeah, it's been a very unfortunate situation with all of the obviously the innocent children who are getting bombed and the innocent bystanders and the civilians and whatnot. Will there ever be peace in the Middle East?
Not with a two-state solution, there won't be.
Yeah, it's not going to happen, I don't think. Kevin, what are your thoughts, or whoever wants to go?
Go ahead, Julius.
I was just gonna say there's already peace in the Middle East, man. Trump did it already. He did it with like 5 or 6 countries. Nothing happened the last 5 years over there. Everything was cool. Iran didn't try us. I mean, I don't know. This little ceasefire they want to do, it's not a two-state solution. Do you guys think it's a two-state solution? No. Like we mentioned last week episode, this is a very complex issue that goes back decades. And listen, this situation, the Israeli-Palestinian battle that's been going on for so long, is pretty much picked aside now in the American political landscape that we were just talking about. You have the left, who is almost like they on Hamas, the terrorist side, the one who firing rockets, the one who backed by Iran, and who really want to kill Jewish people, just like Rhino alluded to last week. It's almost like the left is kind of like on their side. But I mean, it's stupid. It really is. It's caught in the political American political web now, so we can look forward to talking about this more and more in the future, instead of getting real, down to earth action on a humanitarian crisis going on. You want to cry about the humanitarian crisis? Then let's stop. Let's stop this. Let's stop Iran from backing Hamas, blowing, firing rockets at Israel. And I mean, just have a peaceful solution to coexistence, or not.
I thought when Biden, we've been talking about a two-state solution in the Middle East with these two areas for decades now, and it's never going to work. You're never going to be able to successfully have two states. Both sides claim Jerusalem as their capital. There's three major religions that practice in Jerusalem. So how are we just going to split Jerusalem right in half? I mean, it's not just that. You have the border issue. I mean, we're going back 5 decades to the Arab-Israeli war when borders were kind of erased and demolished. How are we going to successfully create borders between these two states? And there's refugees on both sides that have fled. What are we going to do with them? You have the issue of security with both sides. I mean, obviously, Israel is still going to want to defend themselves if they have active military in the area around these borders. I mean, is that going to be taken as an act of war? Is that going to be taken as any kind of conflict? I don't think you'll ever successfully be able to have a two-state system. And even then, Hamas wants the Jews eradicated. They want them wiped off the earth. It comes down to the simple point that Hamas hates Jews. How are you going to stop that? How is a two-state system going to stop Hamas from hating Jews? It'll never work.
It goes back to Iran. They are the ones that are empowering them. It's not the Palestinian territory. They don't have the money or the influence to do any real damage to Israel, but Iran does. And so you got to get to the root of the issue.
It's very interesting what Julius mentioned about the deal that was struck during the Trump administration. Whether you like the former President Trump or not, like, it's true. What happened is true, and part of what we're looking at is there's a big misconception that the social norms have made this a Israeli versus Palestinian problem, but in reality is an Israeli versus Hamas problem, which is a designated terrorist organization, and that's where the misconception has happened. An interesting report or a couple of things that we were reading in the last couple of weeks was that you saw that skyscraper that was bombed in Gaza, right? Where that it had the Associated Press, et cetera, et cetera. Well, here's an interesting piece of information. The United States intelligence community asked the Israeli intelligence community to provide a briefing as to, okay, why did you take it down? So they showed why they did it, and there wasn't an official rebuke from the United States. So one could assume that they must have shown them like concrete evidence that this is why that place or that building needed to come down, and so on and so forth. I mean, at the same time, it's tragic to see what's some of the casualties that we're seeing, children and whatnot, in both sides, because on the Israeli side, innocent people have also been injured. People that have absolutely perhaps nothing to do with what's going on. They were injured, and same thing with on the other side. So as far as the United States, well, I think that there hasn't been a strong vocal support as far as our historically known allies in the Middle East. And I think that has made things very, very, very interesting, because the ceasefire that was brokered by Egypt. Now, it was Egypt. They brokered that deal. And the interesting part is that throughout this conflict, Israel has sent millions of dollars worth of aid into the Palestinian territory, while this conflict is taking place, right? So now, from a bigger social standpoint, I mean, there have been some horrendous hate crimes being committed against Jews right now, because of that misconception of Israeli versus Palestinians, as opposed to Israel versus Hamas. I mean, we're seeing in New York. I was reading a report in the last couple of days that a 97-year-old survivor of the concentration camp at Auschwitz was getting hate mail, telling them things that, Hitler should have wiped you out. Like, that shouldn't be happening on our homeland. You know what I mean? Regardless of your political affiliations. I mean, we recently saw anti-Asian hate crime being signed in Congress, which is fantastic. But at the same time, we can't turn a blind eye on these issues that are currently happening on our homeland. It doesn't matter the race, color of skin. Hate, it's hate.
Kevin, you make some good points. I mean, and Rhino did too, Julius. It's Hamas. See, if you're funding him, you're funding a terrorist organization. America's done that in the past, unfortunately, but you're right. Like, they don't want a two-state thing. Palestinians want the state and want the Jews out of there. They want to eradicate them. Now, it's crazy. Everybody has a hand in the Middle East. There's a lot of countries surrounding Israel that have a lot of hate for Israel. And we have a lot of interest, as Americans have a lot of interest in wanting to be in the Middle East, oil, wanting our military in the Middle East kind of thing. But the crazy thing to me is what you pointed out is you saw in New York these Palestinians attacking Israel people that are Jewish. And we have learned nothing from history. During the World War II, what happened when we were in war with Japan and Italy? And well, it was just Japan. After World War II ended, Germany surrendered, Italy surrendered, Japan was still in the fight. What did we do with Japanese Americans that were here in the United States? Put them in concentration camps. People were I don't know what they were doing as far as violence or whatever, but we learn nothing from history because we're doing it again. Look what's happening with Asian Americans. People were attacking them blindly in there, saying, "Oh, you're part of, what's happening in China or what's happening in other parts of the world." Like, people learn nothing or have any sense of decency towards other people of different nationalities, different ethnicities. It's sick how you learn nothing from history and you're repeating it over and over again. And we all know that famous motto: those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Well, we're doing it a lot nowadays, it seems like. So there's no end in sight to this. There's not going to be a two-state. There's not going to be any peace. There's not going to be. And what they're trying to do is not try to have an all-out war where other countries are Middle East countries surrounding Israel. They're not trying to have an all-out war, but eventually, I honestly think it might come to that.
Yeah. Let's hope not, but
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to go back to what we were just talking about a few minutes ago about just not, these domestic interior battles that we're battling amongst each other, right? With our own people, and I know with Wyatt just said about the Asian American hate bill that was passed and signed also. It's just yeah, that's great that they're doing that, but this is, I mean, at least when it comes to our own domestic affairs, that those kinds of bills, I mean, we shouldn't need them. We just shouldn't. But yeah, I pray for the people out in the Middle East. They definitely have it rough, and it's very, very unfortunate to see what's going on out there. But any final comments on this before we start wrapping it up here? Because I am about to go on a rant for about 5 minutes here towards the end of the show. So, any final thoughts on this?
I think I just wanted to comment quickly on what Julius touched on a little bit ago, and that's stopping Iran from funding Hamas. I mean, there's really very few options of what you can do in the Middle East to influence peace. I mean, you're talking about various groups of people that are born and are taught to hate another group of people. I mean, you're talking about something that's probably going to take generations to teach these people, for them to learn that this isn't okay, that you're supposed to love your neighbor. So I don't think a two-state solution is there. I don't think trying to negotiate peace is probably going to be as successful. Go after where the funding is coming from. Go after where the guns are coming from, where the bombs are coming from. Start there. Take the match out of the hand of the man who wants to set the fire, and then see what you can do about brokering peace. But you have to start somewhere, and I think Julius is correct. Start with Iran.
I feel like it's always Iran that's always kind of starting these conflicts out there. I don't know, Kevin, do you have any final thoughts on Iran and their notorious effort to destabilize the Middle East?
Well, we can see that the issues in the Middle East, they're not new. They go back to many years before Christ. All the way to the fight of, okay, who's the legitimate son of Abraham? Was it Isaac? Was it Ishmael? And so on and so forth. So and ever since it's been a continuous fight over who is the righteous and legitimate, for a lack of a better term, tenant of the territory. So I think that it will be interesting to see what the administration does if the ceasefire it's broken by either party. I think the rest of the world is kind of watching, all eyes on the United States. I mean, it's again, we're interestingly divided, because even within our political systems, you have a faction within the Democratic Party that does not want to fund anything related to Israel. In fact, they're trying to block the arms sales of, I think it was $750 million towards Israel. Then you have, within that same political faction, have the other group that's saying, no, we have to stand with our allies. And then obviously you have the other side of the aisle that's saying, no, we have to stand with our allies. So it's very interesting how things are playing out. And like you said earlier, it goes back to we have our internal struggles that we need to figure it out.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree. It's like we already alluded to. This is not going to be an issue that is going to go away anytime soon. But all right, so we're going to start wrapping up the show here. But before we do that, it looks like I'm up for the final talking point here of the night. And this week, I'm gonna focus on LeBron James, our good friend LeBron James of the LA Lakers. Quick stats for you guys. I'm sure most of you all know this. 4-time MVP, 2-time Olympic gold medalist. He's competed in 10 NBA finals. Only NBA player to win NBA championships on 3 different teams. Yet this man goes out every single game, at least so far in these playoffs, and literally makes a clown out of himself on the floor. I don't care what anyone says. what he does out there each and every time he's been out there these past 2 games, it is clownish. All right. The flopping, the attention seeking on the basketball court, it is ridiculous. Barstool Big Cat earlier today on Twitter, it's all over Twitter. They were talking about the incident where, you have Campaign, right, who went over to back his guy LeBron. I think it was yesterday or over the weekend. All eyes were on LeBron before Cam went over there to, further down the court. LeBron has to get up. He has to, limpingly, oh, my shoulder's broken, I can't move my arm. Walk over to where the attention is, because he needs to be in the front and center focus of all the cameras and whatnot on these people. Why? Why does LeBron feel the need to do this? An accomplished man. We all know what he's done. We all know what he's capable of doing. What else does he need? I think that this attention seeking, this flopping, the excessiveness, it's ridiculous. Now, the other issue with LeBron that took place over the weekend, as we all know, is this tequila event that he went to, where he was caught basically violating NBA protocols on COVID-19, right? He's out there promoting his tequila brand, which, by the way, I will probably try at one point. I won't lie. NBA does nothing to him. They say it's totally okay. He's not violating any rules or whatever, or rather the violation of the rules are not enough to issue any disciplinary action towards him. Let us go back to the Milwaukee Bucks situation from a few years back, where they lost a 2022 second-round pick over conversations, quote-unquote conversations, for one of their players. Forget his name now. Bogdanovich, I believe his name is, of the Atlanta Hawks. The Milwaukee Bucks were engaged in trade talks with the representatives about a possible trade happening, right, with him to Milwaukee. Ultimately, of course, the Atlanta Hawks gave him $72 million, if I recall, and ultimately the Milwaukee Bucks lost some draft picks. They lost the second-round draft pick. Why is there such a double standard when it comes to LeBron James and literally any other team or player in this league? Why is that? Is the NBA coddling to LeBron? I think so. I mean, there's no other explanation for it. I think it's ridiculous. It's really, really unfortunate that the NBA is doing this to him. That they're coddling him. I have watched these games where LeBron will literally do anything that he can to get all the attention on the court, and it is mind-boggling. It is perplexing. I am sick of it. And I honestly quite 100% with a full objection say that once LeBron retires, this league will be 100 times better literally 5 seconds after he announces that it's over for him, career-wise. That is my final point for the night, guys. I am so salty. I have been wanting to say all that for the past 3 days. I have literally been punching air on Twitter. Nick on the YouTube stream says small market versus big market. It's like when the NCAA gets so mad at Kentucky, they punish Tennessee State. That's okay. That's fine. But that shouldn't be like that. And that's my issue. It should not be like that a small market is getting screwed over, or whatever direction we want to take this. That's not it. It's ludicrous to me that's the situation, and LeBron should not get an easy pass for violating those COVID protocols to go show off his goddamn tequila that he's going to be releasing here whenever it is that he's releasing it. So
it's because Adam Silver's a clown.
It's because Adam Silver's a clown. LeBron's a clown. LeMickey is a clown for all this shit. And sorry, I don't mean to say it, but it's just it's infuriating.
Shit's not a bad word.
I am gonna go have a beer because I need one, and it's starting to rain here, so I gotta go close my windows in my apartment, guys. But Kevin, sir, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on tonight. Kevin Cordosa, ladies and gentlemen, for those who are watching, co-founder of the Crude Intelligence Group. Thank you very much. You are welcome back at any time, sir. We really appreciate the insight. Respect what you're doing out there, with your business. And we here at On Point Discussion wish you and your business team all the best moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
No,
Kevin.
thank you, sir. Remember to follow us all here on Twitter at Sports Talk Rhino, yours truly at Bears Fanatico 94, the Cornelius 7, and at the fifth top. Are you on social media, sir?
Yes, I am. Mostly more active on Facebook and Instagram than Twitter.
All right. Well, we'll get your Facebook information, at least maybe for your page or something, and we'll get that up on our social media feed as well for you.
All right, perfect. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you very much, guys. And remember that On Point Discussion is powered by our friends over at Fanatics. Remember to use code 64SHIP for free shipping on all of your orders right now. And of course, sponsored in part by One Call Tech. Remember to visit them at onecalltech.com or give them a call at 1-888-585-8850. Tell them that On Point Discussion sent you, and you will get a special rate on your service. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. On Point Discussion returns tomorrow night, where I sit down with a one-on-one interview with a special guest from Green Bay. So stay tuned for that. Gentlemen, have a good night, and we'll see you all. I'll see a few of you later this week, and I'll see some more of you next week on next week's show. Have a good night, everyone. Stay safe. And of course,
Go Lions.
go Bears.